Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We have another match here to cast between Hamster and Veeq. Let's see. Oh, it is going to be Veeq in the top left and Hamster in the bottom right. I was just about to say I don't know what race Veeq will be playing, and of course Hamster on the other side. Now in the different spawns of this particular two-spawn map by Biddy B, it's called Germination. You've seen plenty of it so far. Let's see one more match on it before we switch gears to some other games. I am very excited about seeing Hamster and Veeq against each other. There is a chance that they end up showing themselves in the same group of Acropolis number 1, which is, of course, going into its battlement stage fairly soon. I think the current working date for that is going to be the 13th of April. So we're working up our way to that as we clear the first two gauntlet qualifiers. The gauntlet stage is actually in two separate phases where there's an A and a B gauntlet, and both of them have some interesting players in them. Some interesting results have already happened. We had a newcomer who played a ZBZ that you may have seen between Jackie Langsky and himself, Taco Cake. It's an interesting name, a funny name, but hey, his play is nothing to laugh at because he's already taken down some people who I thought would maybe do pretty well. Some people who have been with the project for a while, but maybe a little bit inactive in recent history, Moonhunter among them. Then he continued to fight through. He dispensed with Dead Infested, and then he moved on deeper into the gauntlet and went even ahead of Benno, of all players, a player who had previously been doing pretty well for himself after switching to Protoss, but it looks like maybe he lost the magic sauce. Hamster just being annoying with the scribe meanwhile. And yeah, it's interesting to see that sort of stuff. We actually have a number of Zerg players. I'm not sure if Herbmod will be participating in the second gauntlet. He wasn't in the first, but I'm not sure what race he'll be. He was playing Terran more recently, so that's kind of interesting. And then on the side of Art of Turtle, we do have him playing as Zerg as well, of course, as he was in StarCraft 1. So it's just cool. It's cool to see that sort of stuff. It looks like we're going to be setting up for another Warden push here to deny the natural expansion. Since the Hatrosk was on the high ground, this is pretty easy to do. And, you know, I'm not sure if what the economics are going to break out as, but the Warden by the ramp is actually really good for scouting and harassing any units that are going to try to counter push. This, obviously, Drakiden moving across without killing the worker might be a little bit suspicious to Veeq, but he's going to come up here and see that there's no movement happening whatsoever on the gateway because the second Warden has been dropped. So this should reveal to him that something is going on. A Legionnaire gets started. We'll see if that even gets finished. The scribe actually moving back home suggests to me that Hamster is not at all committed with this attack. But 300 resources in the early stages of the game is nothing to scoff at. That's still something you got to keep watch of. Still, the containment being started here is pretty legit. Obviously, both of those Wardens now getting scouted. The worker should actually die here. One more hit will do it. Yep, wasn't able to get up the ramp in time to avoid the vision. And look, the Legionnaire finishes just in time to kill off the unit there that was scouting around. So that's two workers dying in quick succession. Veeq now down, facing a bit of a doldrum situation here. If we get more Drakidens up, they can really step over Quasis, and it's workers being produced right now for Veeq, who just wants to stabilize his economy, I guess, on one base, and hopefully be able to evict his interloper, his intruder. Nexus coming on down for Hamster, so he's not all in this situation by any means. And with all that said, his looks like he puts down a Warden on the high ground over there. I was wondering where that was coming from. The Quasis over here have done a little bit of hull damage to the Drakiden, so you don't want to step too much further forward. But as Hamster played a lot of Zerg, he should know that the tempo of the race, the tempo of the economy, we're probably going to be seeing a Hatrosk and then maybe a Hydrith Den coming up as the follow-up. So, you know, once we get 75 Vespene, don't be surprised if that's the structure you end up seeing. Hamster just poking in. You know, you can do this as often as the shields are fully stocked, right? You can just pop up, maybe take some shots. With only one Drakiden, you can't really execute any Quasis. And this actually is not a bad shout either, you know, stepping forward. Oh, hey, what's going on? And then suddenly, you know, it wasn't a surround, but it was cute to burrow and then do the traps. We've actually seen a lot of that happen with Veeq. He's done a lot of traps in the past, and he's got a lot of Zets. So, you know, now going back into workers, but he can absolutely make a push for this. He didn't go for the Hydrith Den as I had expected. And it looks like he's just going to go ahead and try to flank out the Wardens. The Zets ignore the armor for the Wardens, so that's very, very efficient. The Quasis, on the other hand, not as efficient, but they can just ignore the pylon and now move across the map. We've got a gateway, we've got an embassy, we've got a defensive warden, because Hamster was totally blind and thought maybe there was a chance that it was going to be like a fast NAF attack or something. And yeah, you can see Veeq falling back to just stabilize the game here. Will have a slower expansion than his opponent, but that doesn't matter as much as it does in StarCraft 1, because in Cosmonarchy, the worker saturation rate is actually 2 per node. It's like 2.5 for max saturation, which is a little weird to say, but basically your first 2 workers are fully efficient, your third worker is half efficient. And that half efficiency is great for gas because you have less gas nodes, but it's not as efficient for minerals, right? And so once you get into a point where, you know, on average we have 8 mineral fields in the maps, the ladder maps that we have, the competitive maps. So those 8 mineral fields mean you have 16 workers on your main. Now you start to transfer following workers onto your natural. You still can get some value in overbuilding the workers to get up to 24 for still having value, but odds are you're going to want to watch out for that. Because it's not going to be as efficient as having them elsewhere. So the worker wandering and transferring still happens. It's just later in the game than you would expect. And so containments like that, if they don't hold for longer than, say, like 4 or 5 minutes, they don't necessarily end up being the be-all, end-all. Now, we do have the Hydra's Den, but we crucially also have the Vornath Pond. So is this going to be a case where Veeq is going to experiment with adding Vorvicores into the mix? That's a Zethricore evolution. You take this bad boy, you turn it into this winged variant that has more movement speed and actually slows down enemy units, applies Ensnare as a debuff when it attacks. You can be very, very efficient at busting small numbers of units, right? Because if you think about it, you can get a lot of Vorvs, you can bully things like the Dracodins and stuff, and then you can also slow down things like the Warden attack rate, and that really helps out quite massively, actually. 5th Hatchery, Hatcherosk, coming up online here for Veeq, so that's not bad. And the Legionnaire is going to pop in and scout. He won't make it up the ramp to see. At least he certainly shouldn't, but he did reveal the Hydras. So that tech has been revealed. Veeq did not change that up that much. A Stargate is coming for Hamster. I would say the Zerg is, you know, getting into that situation where obviously they have the higher worker count. They've definitely bounced back from that early game containment. Their army is not as powerful as it used to be. And Veeq is really, I wouldn't, again, you can't call this an all-in, but Veeq going for double evolved tech nodes at the beginning of the game means that his Vespene expenditures are going to be very, very slim. And I don't know about the collision here, but it looks like he's really botched his ridge mining, which is really painful because you don't want to have to destroy that to change it. So that's unfortunate for Veeq, his SimCity working against him here. You would think maybe a worker could fit through there, but it might not be, right? Because the Geyser has always had deceptive collision, and you know that's just the way it's been since time immemorial, you could say. I think it is different in Cosmonarchy, but anyway, it's still maybe, you know, the workers might be slightly too fat or something, right? So we've got lots of static defense erected here for Hamster. It's kind of curious. He's got 3 Wardens on the high ground. He's not going to be able to take a 3rd anytime soon, whereas Veeq is developing pretty nicely. He's adding 2 more hatches for a total of 7. He's going to have insane production, keeping his money very, very low. Going to go up to 8 Vorvs and 4 Bactylisks. So the sort of economy of mutating your units is a little bit different in Cosmonarchy than it is in StarCraft 1. Obviously, most units have a mutation, right, if you think about it like that. So you could kind of also think about it in terms of building mutations. We do have this one Zeth turning into a Vor. That's not going to go very well. This Nexus just got misplaced, so I'm not sure if Hamster will realize that. It doesn't look like he does, so he's just going to go ahead and leave it there. Not going to cancel it. Even if he is cognizant of it, he's not interested in changing it. But to finish the point about mutations, this happens for units and structures. So obviously the Vornath Paw and the Ski-Back Scab, these two were made out of existing pool and den. And if you destroy the Scab, it turns back into the den, because that's what it came from. The same is true for the Zerg units that are actually being mutated. So the Bactylisk will turn back into a Hydra if it was made from a Hydra in the first place. And at Tier 1, you have to make them through the units that you already have. So eventually you can get to Tier 2 and build the sources of Oxal larvae, which are sort of like these mutated versions of larvae that go straight to the advanced strains. And they skip the middleman. And that means that they just die whole cloth. They don't regress. The mechanic is called regression. And they do not regress back into what the form used to be. So, because there was no form that it used to be. I mean, it would turn into a larva or whatever, but we don't have that particular part. So, while we're blabbing about that, we do have a witness accompanying these Gladiuses. It's a great play to do this because they can't burrow to avoid it. And that's a lot of workers dying, but Veeq had the worker advantage. And he still holds the worker advantage, technically. And there's only 3 Gladiuses, so this can only be used as a harassment opportunity. Now, unfortunately for Veeq, he has brought in a lot of his units that are not going to help with this attack force. And I think Hamster's just lost the plot entirely. Maybe he forgot to send his units back there, so that's a big whiff on his part. But, the Vorvs were actually blocking the Hydra, Bactyl, Quasi army. Those units can actually attack up. Obviously, your Zethicores and similar types of units can't attack up, so you don't really want to be using them. But despite that worker harassment, I mean, you know, Veeq is sitting pretty right now anyway. He's actually adding this Orchid Shroud. He's got 10 Skither Cores coming up to hunt down and destroy the Gladiuses, because obviously the Skither Cores are pretty beefy in terms of their power, so they can stay alive for much longer amounts of time. Does he want to show them immediately? It looks like the answer is yes. And so, yeah, you can't really take these fights and live in the, you know, versus the Gladiuses. You're not gonna get too much value out of this. So it's a good trade for Veeq. He ends up he's staying alive thanks to Hamster doing a little bit of micro. But the skits, unfortunately, were not going to be in numerous enough number in that moment. He's got 12 more on the way, though, so that is going to be more than enough to deal with any subsequent hits. You can kind of think of the Gladius versus Skith trades similarly to, like, I guess it could be like Scourge versus Land Effect, or Corsair, as they called in StarCraft 1. It's kind of similar to that in a way, although we're still developing this kind of idea of what Gladius's roles are in the meta, because we've never really seen them be used for harassment until this very game. They're mostly used as army busters or army enhancement, right? Because their bounces channel, and as long as the Gladiuses continue to shoot and stay in the area, the bounces will continue indefinitely. And that's actually why the Skither Core started off that engagement so well, and then started to fall off immediately after. If Veeq had pulled the Skither Cores away after taking the first couple shots, he would have kept most of his skits alive at around half HP, and they would have eventually regenerated. But he, furthermore, could have engaged again onto the Gladiuses, like re-engaged, and all of the bounces that had built up until that point would have been gone. And so he would have killed 2 Gladiuses, maybe lost a couple of his skits from the direct damage, and then saved most of them, and then swung back in, and it's a lot slower to stack up the bounces when you only have 2 Gladiuses instead of 4. So it took a while to explain all of that, but that's basically the dynamic of the particular interaction between those 2 units. I think skits are a great choice. They will eventually be cost efficient, but you do need a little bit of micro to watch out for that. And you know what? It's not a bad shot to go for Nathicores either. This is a very scary air stack of 30 Nathicores, 12 skits. But at the same time, if Hamster somehow holds this, Veeq has no tier 2. He has no way to scale past this. And there are engrams on the way, which are going to shut down air stacks from a defensive standpoint. So Veeq is taking his 4th base rather, and Hamster is taking his 4th base, but this 4th is about to get shut down by the stack of units over here, as the ground army is thinking about moving away. No vision whatsoever for the Zerg player, whereas Hamster at least has a couple of witnesses scattered around, or at least that one witness right there. I think his other ones are sort of in the middle of the map, sort of combing the streets. And yeah, this hatch just finishes and gets attacked immediately after that. So that is a little unfortunate. Obviously, Veeq is not going to be in position to save it. And his Zeth, on the other hand, is going to scout that 4th base coming online for Hamster. Now, this is where you don't want to take the fight necessarily, but the air stack comes on in, and there's no general crowd control. So the skits are going to be doing a massive amount of damage. The Nats completely nuking the Gladiuses out of orbit, and we still have 12 skits. We still have 21 Nats. So this whole stack gets completely wiped, and what does Hamster have in return? He does have a rogue gallery. Actually, he's got a couple of them. Not sure what those are going to be for just yet, but he starts an engram on the ramp. He's going to have to concede control of his potential 4th base, almost certainly, because they are about to fall upon it. Looking at the production tab, we got a lot of Zethra cores in the back, but crucially, Veeq could be putting down his tier 2, and I'm not sure that he knows that. There we go. He just put it down in the main. So while that's happening, his Nexus is indeed going to fall. Hamster needs to think about a counter proposal, some sort of crowd control. He's going to go for Charlatans, which aren't terrible, but they're also not really ideal for crowd control, and there's nothing to defend this mineral line. Land effects are a great choice. Are they a little too late? Feels like maybe they are. Worker count still favoring Veeq. However, he's a little bit overly cautious, I feel like, about pulling away from the Gladiuses. The Air Force has been identified. The Vorvs are going to be great at dealing with this unprotected engram on the front because they slow the attack rate down, like I was talking about earlier, with their ensnare. And the Zoryas are on the case now as well. Disruption Field trying, but the resource rating is happening on this side. I think Veeq's going to take this 3-0 wipe, because even this one up here has been unpowered by the attack up the north gate, and it's just a total collapse of the 3rd base. The 4th is long gone. We don't have anything left here for Hamster's worker count sub 40. Land effects trying to start up. We do have great production for him with the crucibles and such, but I think even his land effects are going to get chewed up here, and the rest of the force can't be dealt with because land effects only attack air units. So that will be GG called, and Veeq, he showed some scary strats. Hamster obviously did get the better of him in a couple of little harassment engages and had some strong openings, but Veeq was able to carry that burden and make it through. So, you know, one-sided series at the end of the day by the scoreline, some very interesting strategic wrinkles here and there. I mean, I'm not even sure you can still marry in the series of Veeq playing Protoss versus Veeq playing Zerg, but we all casted them one back-to-back, so we got to see some interesting action. Join us tomorrow for very different stuff. We're actually going to have two players that you've not seen in the last couple of rotations, so stay tuned for that.